at 6:30.
Yeah.
So, having a quorum and it being 6:30, going to open this meeting of the North Bennington Graded School Prudential Committee for December 11th, 2024. And I'm Ray Molyneux. I'm the chairperson of the board. Lonnie Desorda here is one board member. Doug Bougie, our treasurer. Lori Elwell, our clerk. Karen McNamara, another board member. Matt Patterson, the vice chairperson. And myself, Ray Mullen. And Laura Boudreau, assistant superintendent. And Renee Gordon, our incomparable finance director. All right, so I don't see anybody for public comments, so we'll move to finance treasurer's report. Doug?
Okay. If you lose me, just let me know. I'll try to go back in. I am getting some notices of internet being unstable with the storm going on. So the treasurer's report is pretty straightforward. There really wasn't a whole heck of a lot to report there. But the big report is as of today, the village reconciled and cut the remaining check. So if you remember in November, 200,000 was advanced. So the remaining balance for the preliminary cash flow from the state. So the amount going in is $802,303.09. So that rest paid in full. If you remember last year, we made the change that delinquencies will be paid in full from the village to the school district going forward, and then the village will be the delinquent collector and retain those funds. So the amount that the state said the village owed to the school district is paid in full as of today.
And that's 202,000. No, it's 800,000. That's the tax.
Correct. Right. Yep. So the combination of the two is 1,002,303.09.
Yeah.
That was the state amount that was calculated. So that's the total paid between the 200,000 from November, and then the 802 and change brings it to paid in full. So there'll be a final reconciliation sometime in the spring. And the last few years, there's been overpayment. So then the school district pays the village back the amounts that were overpaid, but we won't know if there's an overpayment, underpayment, anything until the springtime.
Okay.
Other than that, the only other thing I have is the tax loan, but we'll wait until the consent agenda to discuss that and put that to the vote with the warrant.
Well, the consent agenda is the next item.
All right. I didn't want to rush you, Ray.
Well, I think we'll try to get through this fairly quickly. We get to Renee running through our draft budget. I think she's going to do that for us. So, next up is the
Yeah.
Thank you. So the minutes from November 13th, 2024 meeting and the warrants. So,
I'll make a move to accept the warrants.
okay.
I'll second.
That's
Not in there.
well, I can look at it up here.
Pulling it up too. It's just the AP warrant.
Right,
$325,024.58
correct. And
is comprised of.
there's payment to Lori for minutes $50. Then we pay uh, independent schools other than the village school, Grace Christian, for two tuition for two students. This is a quarter of the total for the two students of $46.75. Island Hall tuition for three students, 78,705 50 cents. Maple Street, 18,346. So it's for four students. Sacred Heart, the total is 76.50 for five students. Interestingly, on Sacred Heart, they give a discount for a second child from a family, and they are extending that to this district. So we pay a slight discount on the second, a couple of siblings. South Shore tuition for 18 students, $82,557. Then we have assessments to the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union for administrative services, audit, early education program, financial services, HR administration, special education administration, special education for early education, and tech administration. That totals $58,222.08. Then the village school tuition for 82 students at $145,631, and our postal box fee for $188. A lot. All right. So that was the minutes, as I said. I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. If I get a second, then we can have any discussion if there needs to be any discussion.
I'll motion to accept them.
Thank you, Karen.
Second.
Thank you. So are there any questions with the minutes from last month? Seeing none offered, and the warrants I've gone through. So any questions about any of the amounts I mentioned on the warrant? All right. Call the question. All in favor of approving the consent agenda? Say
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Did I hear Matt? I did. Matt,
Aye.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Sorry,
Aye.
missed your voice there. So that's unanimous. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Doug because he wants to talk to us about the repayment of the line of credit loan that we've had.
So we'll want to do a motion. We have the tax loan, which will be due December 31st. So I did not have the statement prior to the actual warrant, so it didn't get on the warrant. But if we get it approved here with the vote, then we can have it paid. M&T takes it right out of the account. And then we can have the warrant in next month's packet for recording purposes. But so the total amount that we'll need the motion to pay is $102,025.39. And knock on wood, this is one of the years where we've had to use very little. We only had to take one advance of $100,000. So the $2,025.39 represents the interest, which again is one of the lower amounts that we've had in a number of years. So things just worked out, with the cash that was still in the account, plus the state did get the payment out in early September. So we were able to
this year. Yes.
exactly. So that makes a big difference when that payment comes out in September for the state ed. So if nobody has any other questions, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. We'll need a motion to approve payment of that.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Matt. Kieran, were you seconding?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Um, I think it's pretty straightforward. Are there any questions about what Doug presented? Seeing, hearing none, I'll call the question. Are we all in favor?
Aye.
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 That sounds like all of us. Thank you. So, next on this agenda is FY 26 budget review. And, Renee is here to walk us through it.
Hi.
Thank you.
Typically, I start with looking at expenditures. And this is great. Nothing's sharing on my screen. Try again.
Okay.
See if we do it this way instead.
There it is.
There we go. Okay, so the first section of the expenditure budget are costs associated with the Board of Education. We pretty much level funding most everything, possible reduction, or at least in this draft, of poll workers, dropping that budget down by $800 to $3,500. And then the next line that has a variance there is the assessment for the SVSU Executive Administration. So $43,020, which is based on the current draft of the budget that was presented to the SVSU board on Monday. And also factoring in the current version of the long-term weighted average daily membership, which presently is preliminary version 1, but we're anticipating we will see at least one more version because we know that there were issues with the reporting of our early essential education students, triple E students, which is special education for our pre-K students. They unfortunately did not appear in the ABM. So our IT and our data team are working on that to make sure all of our students are reported correctly and that the agency has the files correctly as well. So all in all, the that grouping of expenditures for Board of Ed, 109,292, or an increase of 7,779 in this draft, the budget. Next section is for the treasurer, and there have been no changes made to that, so that is level funded, keeping everything as is. The next line is for the audit. And unfortunately, when our engagement letters come from the auditors, we're always well past budget season. So by the time I got this year's, FY 25 was set, I don't know what our audit for 25 expenses are going to be, but I'm projecting based on the last increase was a significant one. So that's why we're seeing an uptick there. They have bolstered up their staff. We had a new team this year. They were actually on site for several days, and things went really well. So we're anticipating actually getting financial statements in January this year. So yeah,
We've done a lot of that online.
yes, but they were here for three or 4 days.
Okay.
So that, again, assessment is just based on my projections of what the audit fee will be going forward, netted with any offsetting revenue that we had from prior years. So total of $6,150 is the projected audit assessment for next year. Legal services, we just have that level funded at 1,000 in case there's a small need. Probably won't get you a heck of a lot, but at least there's a little bit there. The next assessment showing up there is the SVSU Human Resources Administration. just a small increase from $2,010 to $2,657. I say small when I'm looking at overall costs. It's a big impact or percentage wise to this budget, but when you're looking at the SU,
It's a small denominator, so.
Yeah. And then the tech administration is a decrease in the current draft of the SVSU budget for North Bennington. So that's going down by $1,527 for a total of $17,764. Again, in the current draft with the current long-term weighted ADM. The next section is fiscal. So the assessment for my department projected right now to be 25,291. So that's an increase of just over $7,100. And a lot of these assessments are going up because we've been whittling down our fund balances. So that's why they look so significant. But be that as it may, that's the result. Supplies for fiscal services. I don't see that we've spent anything there the last couple of years, and what we would spend that for could possibly come out if you're so inclined.
Is that mostly for the treasurer's expenses?
Could be. Yes, that's where we would charge it.
Yeah.
Because the bank fees are also in this category. But right before I get to bank fees, the short-term interest, borrowing interest, as Doug just noted, significantly less than what we had budgeted. And Ray, I think you said that you were looking to potentially reduce this $11,000 budget for short-term interest.
Well, I was thinking, the first three columns show you the actual.
Right.
And then Doug just pointed out what the actual will be on this year, which is quite substantially below $11,000. So if we might think about reducing this by 5,000 or 6,000, which is worth pursuing if we're pretty confident. Or are we confident, Doug, about, did he leave or
No,
is he still there? Are we confident that we'll get similar interest rate treatment?
So
next year?
I would think over the next year, I mean, the projection right now, going forward is still for a rate reduction within the next couple of Fed meetings. So even if there's, say, one small reduction and then maybe they hold tight for a while, so your interest rate that we patient loan, which we likely will need. I mean, I don't see that need going away for the district. I think, like you said, if we maybe cut that in half, I think we're safe because this year it was lower because we had to use less. The rate was actually a little bit higher this year than it had been past, but because we didn't have to use the full note, we didn't have the higher amount of interest. So I would be hesitant to bring it down to say 2,000 or 3,000 just in case we had to use. But I think, if we did reduce it, if we reduced it by 5,000, that would bring it down to 6,000 as a line item. I think that we would be okay in that range.
Okay. Just a straw poll. Is that copacetic with the rest of the board, aside from myself?
Yeah,
Yeah.
All right, so we'll ask for 5,000 reduction on that line. And actually, before we proceed, there is back in the Board of Ed expenditures, the secretary and poll workers expense. Now, I just looked at what we had been spending, and I was thinking, we could knock that back a little bit, but on the other hand, it's not very much money. And so I'll ask Lori, who actually is in charge of all of those expenditures, what she thinks about that.
You know, I think you should just leave it alone because you never know what's going to happen.
Okay,
We had we had a vote on September 10th we didn't know anything about.
yes, right.
I mean, we knew about it, but it was a surprise that came up, and see, if it's not gonna make that big a difference, I think you should just leave it.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
Actually, and the other thing, no, we left the contingency on that one. We took the other one out. So the
Yep.
contingency board of it, we left the 50,000 there. Yep.
Can't do anything about the audit number. Although we don't actually know what it is.
Not for 20.
It's just an instrument.
No.
Okay, so if you want to
Short-term
continue,
interest will bring down to 5,500,
6,000.
6,000. Okay.
When is the QSCB done? Thought we were,
I think in 27, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, Matt, I think we looked it up last year when we were making the payment. I think there's 2 years left on it.
Right. Because it was, I think it was taken out in 2011, or I believe it was 2011, but it doesn't actually wind its way to completion until about 16 years later, so. So it's soon. It's almost time for another bond,
exactly.
Yep. Okay, so, the Q scab is the next thing.
Well, the bank fees, I just wanted to mention, I think I put it in the email last night, but I did tick this line up $100, although I probably don't need to based on what the expenses have been in the prior years. But the reason I did that was because IRS regulations changed with regard to this scab. We call it, probably shouldn't call it Q scab, but
That's
the
the way
bond.
it always got referred to. So,
Yeah. So again, the IRS
Qualified
school
school construction bond.
bond. Yep. IRS regulations changed for filing, and U.S. Bank is basically incurring an expense that they're passing on to the debtor. So that's $100 fee that we'll see annually. The first time that hit was this year, which was a surprise. So of course I reached out to the bank saying, hey, you can't charge me more than $1,000. But they said, oh yes, we can, because the IRS changed the regulations. So that's why that's there. But I certainly think we could probably drop that back to 1,300 without, and of course it's not going to have a huge impact.
Yeah, it's so de minimis that it just ends up in surplus. So I don't think
Leave it
that's,
there.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should leave it there too, because the flip side of the coin is you never know if M&T is going to change anything on
right.
our operating accounts. So to have that little bit of the cushion there, I think
So
it makes
keep
more
at
sense.
14. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And no changes on the interest or principal amounts that are due back for that bond for next year. So that has been level funded. And then we get into the basically direct instruction costs for the district. So the first item there is the assessment for pre-K. Again, I anticipate that this number will change once we get the revised ADM, because we were missing students. But as of right now, the draft that we had with the long-term weighted ADM, just a slight uptick of just under $2,000 for that assessment. And then for each of the schools, I basically took our current enrollments that I'm aware of, and if there have been any changes, I can certainly update this. But threw all of them in either with what the tuition is presently, or some of them with a tuition but then an increase of 5%.
I did a little study of, who, what sixth graders were included in this, that will be, eliminated, but might be replaced by someone coming in at the lower grades level. And, I didn't find too many. And, it doesn't, I'm not talking about the village school because I was just looking at the other independent schools and the SD, UESD students. It's only about three, I think it's four. It's four that I have listed here. And I think the likelihood is that we'll actually have someone filling that spot coming in behind that sixth grader graduating. So I don't think it's worth adjusting what you got there.
So I had a 129 current, and then the number from our early education programs director has identified 19 incoming kindergartners for the North Bennington School District. So those I just plopped in the village school section
Right
there.
Is that I'm assuming those kindergartners are what's already in pre-K right now at the school.
Well, not necessarily, but yeah.
Not necessarily at the village school. They could be in a variety of programs, but they're ones that our early education department is aware of.
And they're not necessarily in the pre-K program either.
Ray,
Yes.
I don't know if you know the answer to this question or not. Lori may, if you don't. So of those, whatever it was, 18 or 19 students that Renee just said, the ones that are not in the pre-K program at the village school, does Tim reach out to those families directly to try to discuss there's Tim. Perfect. To reach out to those families to have them hopefully, be at the village school.
Yeah.
So between Lori, Sherry, or myself, one of us reaches out to those families to talk to them about what we can offer. Lori's sort of the forefront of that for that early childhood take admission part, but Sherry plays a big part, or I do. Any of the three of us will actively be pursuing those families.
Perfect. Great.
Lori, did I miss anything?
No, that's absolutely right. It was funny because Sherry and I worked on that a little bit today and yesterday. So it's already in process.
All right. So currently there will be 19 kindergartners at least.
At
And
least.
we're putting them in the village school numbers for lack of knowing where they're going anyway. So that puts the village school at 95, right? That's the number, right?
Yes.
Okay. So it would be great if that could be solidified by contacts you guys are making. And so what were we going down through these numbers? I mean, they're on the screen for you.
Yeah. I don't
So
know
you
if we
could
want me to-
see the comment that Renee has there that describes how that number is calculated out. And that's when it says like 18,346, that's the current year state average tuition for K6, K5. And that star 5, that means 5% plus on that
Right.
piece. So that you can work out what those what the actual tuition rate is projecting to be per student.
So overall, the whole category is just a increase of just under 1.5% or $42,916. All just forecasted at this point. Announced tuitions are due to the AOE beginning of next month, so we'll be able to refine these, and I'll be having to run those numbers for other districts as well.
Yeah, just to refresh your memories about this, the average announced tuition is for independent school. That's the maximum that they can receive in payment from a district, charge the district. They can charge more for the person, but the district is limited as to what it can pay to that statewide average at a maximum, unless we vote at the polls to support a higher number, which we do for the village school. With respect to the Southwest Vermont Union Elementary School District, we pay whatever tuition they ask, and that could be more, but it is less, as you can see there. It's at $15,000. You know that number, right? Or that's your estimate?
Yeah, we have to calculate that, which I have not done.
But you were just
yet.
adding.
Yeah,
So it was
$14,500.
14.5 last year.
Yeah, their budgets, well, they didn't have a quorum at their meeting last night, so I didn't actually get to present their budget, but it's up.
Okay.
First draft is up significantly, so.
Yeah, and so all these numbers are subject to some fluctuation because we don't actually know the state average yet, and because the SVSU budget may change, although I kind of doubt it. So that might affect the Southwest, the SVUESD students. And 5%, I think, is a reasonably generous figure, so I doubt we're going to see for the independents that are affected by it. I think they will probably remain within there. Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, Ray, I'm not sure, where are we with the discussion with the village school about tuition rates and all that?
Well, we could have a discussion. We have, we have, I mean, this is a draft. This is not the actual budget. So we could schedule that for next meeting in January.
Tim, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to have a conversation in January. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do. We know there's a big push to try and, reduce costs as much as possible. So we have to look at what we can do to try and meet that need across our budget for the district. I think a decent placeholder is 5%, but I'm hoping that we can come in lower than that, but I'll have to see where we can land.
Thank you.
Right, so that's a note to all of us that we will have that discussion with Tim in January. And at that point, we should know them, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah, okay. Any other comments?
Freezing. Now it's cold.
All right,
The air
So-
just decided to kick on, like what?
so,
We're up to
Can you-
the sinking fund. which if I understood your note correctly, was to drop that in the FY26 budget down to
that's right.
50. Okay. So that is what we have done, and planning to take, as we do every year, whatever remains of that $203,000 from the current budget,
Right.
move that over into the sinking fund at the end of the year.
I want to remark on that I think the best thing I know we have 25,000 off of it at the moment. I think the best thing for us to do here would be to put that expenditure against the board's $50,000 contingency. So we can leave that 203 intact and just transfer it in. Because
Okay.
we're gonna need to spend it on this ventilation system.
Is that money that we're just holding on to for the ventilation system, or?
Yes, it is. Because that's part of the funding scheme for the ventilation system. Most of it is being granted, but
Gotcha.
we had, I anticipated expenditure, so I put it in there. It's the most I felt we could drag it out to. We're gonna take all of it, basically. There's something else I would say about that. So, Tim, you want to comment on the contract situation there? Or, it just update us?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Actually, I just received the completed contracts from the contractor. So we're moving forward with that. They have to then go to their subcontractors and complete all those pieces, but we're on our way to making the project move forward. So it seems very favorable.
And you already have an agreement with efficiency.
With the main contractor, which is Naylor and Breen, but they have to then solidify all their subcontracts. But we are in line to move forward. The next piece would be probably ordering and this literally happened I had a meeting earlier today and just found out that we had the finalized contracts, but the next piece would be ordering the blower system, or the main mechanical piece for the rooftop application, which we probably want to get ordered as soon as possible. So that's the next piece on the agenda.
Right. All right. I would remark about this. This also, this 203,000 goes into the sinking fund, which is actually part of our surplus. It's just designated. It's committed. So, the last things are, what? You want to continue, Renee?
Property insurance, I have not adjusted based on what we've spent. I think that's sufficient to cover us for next year. So overall, that building maintenance category is a decrease at this point of $153,000. We don't have anything budgeted for ground maintenance, but what you're seeing in the budget are just actual expenses from previous years. Correct. A very small amount in homeless transportation, which might get you to transport a child for a couple of days or a day. Correct. So
even with the it's early as the bus, the van, right? So if it's just older child, that's going to be a lot more expensive.
And then the last section is related to student services or special education. So the first line, the assessment for student services, again, for next year looks to be 0. and that is because of the allocation of the census block grant, which is a 3-year average of long-term membership of the district. So essentially, we get allocated a lump of money from the Agency of Education, and then I go through and I break that all out by district and allocate the cost out. So that was over $405,000, I think. That plus the fund balance coming in, so you're offsetting that. So it's essentially a zero that would be due back. And then the rest of it, I've actually used to offset the early education, special education portion. So that's offsetting that bottom line there too of the 66,415 assessment for triple E. The contingency that we had in
That actually, yeah, okay, so it's down to 25,066 something.
well, it's actually an increase because their overall the expenses, the fund balance coming in had been spent down.
Yeah.
So how I track early education, it's in a separate fund, which is shared between SVU, ESD, and North Bennington. So I allocate what's left between that, but then I took North Bennington's excess, which essentially showed that we would have to be cutting a check back, which doesn't make sense because you have
Makes
other
no sense.
expenses.
Right.
So I applied that to the triple E assessment.
Great. So you will notice that there's you took the 50,000 out on
Yes,
the
for the
new grant.
contingency.
I'm looking at the first
Yeah.
piece of paper. So I was astounded at the prospect of having no money in the budget for special ed last year. So I said we ought to have a contingency for that. But after Renee explained how much is in the fund, I think we take that. I asked her to take that 50,000 out because there's no need for it. There's already plenty of budget there for the expenditures we have in this area.
So the remaining portions of that section of the budget are the assessment for student services administration, which will be, again, this draft of the budget, $7,935. And then the triple E assessment of 66,415. So overall total of that category, 74,350, or an overall decrease of 8.79%, bringing the overall draft one budget for the North Bennington Graded School District to 3.2 million, almost 3.3, which is a reduction over the current year of just over $100,000. So if we scroll up and look at the revenue, so I haven't touched the earnings interest, which we probably could, although we know that the interest rates are coming down. So essentially by not bumping that up, we're asking more from the ed fund than we probably need to, but it's just aiding in fund balance going forward.
Yes.
The QSCAB investment money that comes back to us. You can see in previous years,
Yep.
It got lumped in together. So showing that we didn't have any, but it was just the 2 years that got
Okay.
accounted for in 23. Rent from the village school. And then our fund balance coming in for FY26 is $219,000 lower than what it was for this year. So all of that taken into account, our demand or our ask on the education fund, or also known as the general state support grant, at least in this draft, looks to be $3.1 million, or an increase of 3.9%. The average or the forecasting that was done by the Department of Taxes, the Joint Fiscal Office, the Agency of Education, projected average increase in education spending or the general state support grant of 7%. So well within that helping to keep those offsetting ones that are going to be higher than that. So all that being said, if we jump over to the tax rate calculation, it's bigger. The top portion of the last page of the document that was posted, I think it got posted this afternoon. No, maybe it was this morning because I did send it last night. So these are the long-term weighted average daily membership numbers for all of the elementary, basically towns that are part of MAU. Just because I'm showing MAU as a whole, that's why the other towns are shown here. But I have North Bennington bold. So of the students in North Bennington, 47.72% of them in their weighted form are at the elementary level, and 52.28% are at the secondary level. So we then have to use those percentages to prorate the taxes between MAU and North Bennington, which is this fun calculation that we do down below. So looking at the North Bennington budget that we just looked at, the 3.2 million, almost 3.3 with our offsetting revenue, gets us back to that education spending number of the 3.1 million. We take our equalized pupils number from above and divide that to give us our education spending. And you know what? I need to update this because it's not equalized pupils anymore. It's long-term weighted ADM.
It's
So
an
more to do.
ADM number now.
So I will correct that. Sorry. So it's our education spending per long-term weighted ADM. And then we compare that essentially to what the homestead property yield is, and the recommendation which came out with the tax commissioner letter on December 2nd, is 85.53. This number has been adjusted by a new part of the calculation, which is known as the statewide adjustment. So the legislature introduced this and it passed at the past session as it has been explained to us business managers, in an effort to smooth the impact of CLA on tax rates, they've introduced the statewide adjustment. So if this statewide adjustment didn't exist, the homestead property yield, that number would have been $11,879. So pretty much a significant jump over what it was last year, which is definitely going to help the tax rates. But with that, the adjustment going in, so it's estimated at 72%. So that's been applied, and that's why the number looks so low. But it's also impacting other parts of the calculation as well. Just as a side note, there is a session that the AOE is holding tomorrow to talk about a couple of things with business managers on these calculations. So I have my question into Brad just to make sure that this calculation is correct and that the 2024 Act 84, which introduced a cent adjustment for the shift from equalized pupils to long-term weighted ADM. North Bennington was one of the districts that qualified for that last year. The cent adjustment was 17 cents. This year set to be 14 cents. But it is to be adjusted again by that statewide adjustment. When I first looked at it, I assumed that it would be a multiplier. But the calculator that came from the agency has it being divided by, which is then increasing it. So,
Which seems counterintuitive given what the act was to do, which was to reduce it every year for 5 years.
Right.
Until it's gone.
So if it's not divided by the statewide adjustment, but rather multiplied by it, then it's basically a 9-cent swing. It's going to be a decrease of, or the cent adjustment would drop to just over 10 cents, I believe. But again, hoping to nail that down tomorrow.
So that
in
would
that
actually,
session.
well, go ahead, you can get this out later.
So blending, and this is the current draft of the MAU budget with their corresponding numbers. So blending and applying those proportionate amounts to the estimated district equalized, homestead rates and blending them together. North Bennington comes to the Bennington and Shaftesbury ID 130.65 as the anticipated equalized homestead tax rate before CLA. The Vermont Department of Taxes did have on their website, and it's still up there for everybody to access, an estimate of what the CLAs might be with the statewide adjustment. So they're projecting the CLA for North Bennington to be 60, the CLA for Shaftesbury ID district as 70. But again, factoring in that statewide adjustment, it changes those numbers upward to then the resulting tax rates of 1.5741 for North Bennington, 1.3469 for Shaftesbury ID, which compared to this year's tax rate is a savings on both.
Now, if you're actually supposed to multiply instead of divide at that previous point,
Would you like to see what it does?
yeah. Still 4 cents under. I'm sometimes amazed at what actually happens once they get.
And they have not made this any less complicated. It's
No,
just
absolutely not.
because when you look at, the budget, at least, this budget in particular, is a decrease, but some of our other districts, like the Arlington I was just meeting with, they're looking at a fraction of cent increase on their tax rate with an overall budget that was presented at an 8% increase. So it's just so complicated that you can't just look in any one place to figure out.
No. It is. I mean, I did understand this stuff until last year.
Right,
And
and that's
now it's like-
that's the problem with the CLA is instead of truly fixing it, they're trying to band-aid and back into everything.
Yeah, they're trying
that,
to.
It's a
prepare the
broken
taxpayers
system.
Yeah, but it's crazy. I don't really understand why they're even doing it because the way that they're applying it, it negates itself. So the tax
Right.
rate's going to be the tax rate, whether or not the statewide adjustment is there. So
Yeah.
I don't
That comes to the same
understand.
point, yes.
I don't understand why it's there. But anyway, it's been explained because they are trying to smooth the impact of the
Right.
CLA on the tax rate.
So what's the impact? I mean, what's the confidence we have on those numbers? I mean, I gotta think it's kind of like zero.
Well,
mean-
it's a lot of estimates at this point. The only thing I would say that you have control over is your expenditure budget, right? And the ADM, which we're working to make sure that the state has correct. So once we get those numbers,
That's a key number for that, for to be
Yeah.
correct.
but
And
the yield,
as you mentioned, I can point out again, there's several students not in this.
Right.
In our number because they didn't get downloaded or something.
yeah, the agency, I think just this year changed their system. They were using something called EdFusion. Now they're using EdFi. So instead of us sending the information, they're pulling the information. It's just been,
Okay.
slightly.
So just Ray, you think there's numbers in our ADM that aren't in there that could actually positively impact?
Yeah, there are a couple of triple E students
Okay,
and they're, they're students. They're not full weight because they're pre-K, but they're still there, and it does add something.
Yep.
Not a whole lot, but about one student really.
So am I, naive to think that we might actually be looking at a negative tax rate?
Um, I don't know, man.
Okay,
It looks kind of like it's going to work out that way. I find it shocking myself.
yeah,
I don't really believe it, but
Yeah, I mean, the CLA is an estimate at this point. The statewide adjustment is an estimate. I don't know who is supposed to be deriving the statewide adjustment, but we typically see CLAs come out right before the first of the new year. So as soon as, information starts trickling in,
that's a tax office function.
the property valuation department of the tax, of the Department of Taxes.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Renee, what do you think the likelihood of the CLA actually changing before the new year, before we actually get into budget season?
This is the first time they've ever had an estimated CLA available, so I would think that there's something that they're
There's
using
got
to,
some data in there.
yeah. But how accurate it is, I really don't know. And again, with this new statewide adjustment, I have no idea again how they're kind of calculating that and how they're going to land on what that number is actually going to be. But again, it's an in and an out, so that number really isn't going to impact it. It's what the CLA ends up being. And of course, the yield, which we really won't know until the spring as every year, because we pass all of our budgets, and then it's up to the legislature to make sure that the education fund has enough money
Yep.
to support all the budgets that have passed throughout the state.
Yep. They have to do that, and then they adjust that yield rate accordingly, somewhat politically, because of the inconvenience or the tendency to enrage taxpayers of the increases.
In my layman's term, I consider or I explain the yield as the lever that the legislature uses to take away or put more money into the
That's right.
education fund. So
That's right. It is exactly.
So that is what I have for you this evening. But as I continue to get information in, we can certainly revise. And I don't know if you want to look at another date to, that's what the action requested on the budget review is just mainly to look at the calendar. And if we just wanted to wait till your next regular meeting,
I
probably
think
be
that's
okay.
like 14th.
On second Wednesday? Yeah, second
No,
Wednesday.
no, it's not. Yeah,
Maybe the 8th.
the 8th. Okay. Because the first of the year is on the first.
Yes.
It's on Wednesday. Yeah. So yes, it'd be the 8th. I was thinking about the village trustee because I think that's second Tuesday after the first. What is it, Matt? Can you tell
It's
me
the
that?
first Tuesday, it's
Sorry.
first Tuesday after the first Wednesday, so it's the 7th.
It's the 7th. Okay, so it does track a day ahead of this meeting. Okay, good. Thank you. Are there other questions or suggestions for places where you think we ought to adjust downward or upward? Any line items of expenditures?
no,
No, I think that's good. And thank you again, Renee.
Yeah,
So I'll drop the short-term interest to 6,000. Then in the next draft, if I have refined tuition numbers, we can definitely update that. Any other information that comes in from the state, we'll certainly update that as well. And I'll just plan to have it in your packet for the
Right.
next,
And,
regular
and
meeting.
we're nowhere near, obviously, can't be anywhere near their excess spending threshold.
You are not, and so far, so much so I didn't even bother to,
Thank you.
You know,
You told me that, but so
it's, yeah, I want to say it's $16,000. But yeah, you're at 13, so no. And then the only other thing to share, I guess, would be just the warning window for Lori to post for town meeting. The window is between January 23rd, which is a Thursday, and February 2nd, which is a Sunday. So we can warn the budget before that, but Lori, that would be when you need to have it posted in that 30 to 40-day window before town meeting, which is on March 4th of 25. And
Thank you.
I always have Cassie double check my counting backwards. She
Yes,
she can-
absolutely. Thank you.
thanks, Renee.
all right, so I don't really have anything else to offer here for this evening. Oh, we have policy. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Warning.
Yeah, no, skipping that. So we have two policies to warn. One is 1,090 use of school facilities. I'll make a motion that we warn it.
So moved.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Thank you. Policy 5156, student nutrition and wellness. That's also a warning.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
I,
All right. Chair's report, I've already told you I don't have anything else to say. I jumped ahead. So, there is an internal financial controls document that was in here, which is basically a long list of various points of control in which mostly, most of it is we definitely have controls out the wazoo here.
It's not easy to pay a bill.
And speaking for this district, there's no way anyone could alter anything. But so, I think we ought to adjourn.
can I just make one more comment? It's an aesthetic comment, but I think that the conference room there should get rid of the pumpkin. We're
Thank you, Matt. I'll take care of that.
Little David.
Thank you.
Little David.
And otherwise, I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good night, everybody. Take care.